Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for your supports. Like, subscribe, if you can. Go on Patreon or PayPal and help keep this channel survive and continue to grow. And whenever I can, I buy a little bit more equipment, a little bit more. I mean, there's one thing to the sophistication of the channel, but there's also just the day-to-day making it happen. So I want to start, as has been my habit, with a little story, a little thought experiment, and then we'll see, because I don't read ahead, nothing's scripted here, so it's interesting to me how when I offer these little moments or analogies to our practice of Buddhism, I often find them mirrored in some form in the sutras or reading material. They seem to dovetail really easily. And I find that kind of encouraging and interesting anyway. All of us, I assume, who are listening to this channel, this broadcast, this podcast, have heard of the multiverse or the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics. And I wanted to talk about it for a moment because there's different interpretations. I don't want to get too sciencey, but just the basis for that thinking, I think, might be useful to consider how our minds work with regard to the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment, because that still seems, we put all this verbiage around it, but it still seems very difficult for myself, and I assume for all of you, to perceive of the mind as this amazing sorting machine that in every single moment has, we say 3,000 realms, but there's a lot more going on than simply the number 3,000. But even if you're just thinking of the number 3,000, because it's in the title, yeah? There are all these realms. In other words, realms are possibilities, potential, probabilities, right? And those probabilities, all 3,000 of them, happening moment to moment to moment, we know that our conscious experience, our samsaric senses, and our mind, we don't experience that decision making. That's so many decisions in an instant after instance after instance after instance after instance. The numbers get mind-boggling, yeah? So what's really happening? What decisions are being made under the hood, as well as ones that we go, aha, I'm making a decision, which takes how many moments to arrive at, and how many realms are possible in that decision that are built on decisions on blah, blah, blah. How do I even know what the heck I'm doing? Am I just plummeting through life? Well, most people do, yeah. Until we learn differently, until we learn that we can navigate that plummeting, that we can influence it, and perhaps achieve a quiescence, a non-plummeting, and instead navigate within the flow, kind of get control of the driving, and actually have a goal, aim towards something that's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Cohesive? A decision toward a holistic equanimity, right? So I see an analogy here. You've heard of the double slit experiment in quantum, right? Where they talk a lot of words about light photons being both a wave and a particle. Well, it's very easy for physicists to talk this way, or scientists to talk this way. But you must first start by defining your terms. Because particles are an illusion. What? What did you just say? Particles, the word particle, a container, simply means a set of tendencies and conditions. Oh, that sounds like Buddhism. The illusion particle, like a thing, a particle is not a thing. A particle, I hate using the word over and over again, but I really want you to understand, is made of, is constructed of, is a mental image and construction of tendencies and conditions of energies. Energies that in certain combination make a massless particle, a mass particle, an atom, a proton, an electron. Those are all forms of energy. And in different combination, they act, they behave in different ways. In some ways, they combine and attract others, and in some ways, they repel and push away others. Like oil and water, right? So on and so forth. So understand the word particle doesn't mean a solid thing. The word particle is a container term for a certain set of tendencies and conditions. And in this experiment, that tendencies and conditions, which are probability, they're not defined things, they have properties. And when we push them through a decision-making process, they obviate themselves, this probability, into a certainty, into an instantiation. I'm this. Which means now that I'm not that. I can't define that ahead of time. I'm just probability. But when I'm forced to be, I do that. The probability collapses. And we think of collapse as like a football out of air. But don't think of collapse that way. Think of collapse as the probability ends. The wishy-washiness, not sure what's going to happen, ends because it happens. And now it is. A different set of tendencies and probabilities, potentials, but observable in a certain state. So you see how the words can get really confusing. But the multiverse is an expression of that experiment, that postulate, that idea in quantum, that particles aren't particles, they're all waves. Waves are frequencies, waves are potential, waves are energy. And how will that energy, where is it? What does it look like? It's just energy. But scientists, mathematicians, they're obsessed with identifying everything. So all their experiments are about taking this potential from the universe and identifying it, forcing it to identify. That's what an experiment is. And if their prediction of what it will identify in their mathematics repeats, they say they've succeeded in identifying it. But in a way, they've done exactly the opposite of what they should. And quantum actually says this. Stop identifying everything and realize that everything is fields of energy, right? Quantum fields, gravitational fields, electromagnetic fields. Everything is potential with certain tendencies and conditions, but that doesn't define you or me or what it is. It's a field, a potential. And that potential, how can you assign a number to it? Depending on how you experiment with it, you will get certain results. What are results? The collapsings of the potential instantiating thus. Under these tendencies and conditions, you get this. Well, guess what? That's exactly how karma works. Out of the potential realms that we, with our tendencies and conditions, experience in each and every moment, we, with our minds, collectively gravitate toward instantiating this way and this way and this way and this way. And that is what we identify with to construct our idea of who we are. And every moment of every minute of every hour, we are making those decisions consistently, habit-formingly, to define who we are. Well, who are we? We are our experience of life. That's who we are. And that's very validating of identity. But if you deconstruct it just a little bit, the fields of potential with our karmic freight train of potentials is a moment-to-moment being. And so it stands to reason that if we can train our mind to intervene just a little bit, we can shift that manifestation, because the potential is endless. And this is what Shakyamuni says. Shift that huge potential away from identifying thisness. I know I made up another word. And move the potential toward the potential that's there. It's already there. Of enlightenment. Of experiencing life in a way that isn't so identified, and therefore anchoring your potential kind of in a stuck state. Kind of like when a record, well, most of you don't know what a record is, or you know what it is, but You've never experienced a record skipping on the groove of a record, right? But you've experienced, well, hell, it's part of music, was for quite a while actually, this constant repetition, because the needle doesn't keep going to continue the rest of the song. It's kind of how we live life, repeating endlessly the same results of the potential. And that's what I'm saying is kind of plummeting through life. We can influence that. We can move the needle. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. And each one of those decisions, that being, that experience, is a perceptive reality of the universe. So if you can move the needle, or if you're just plummeting moment to moment to moment, you are constantly abiding by the decisions, the collective decision, identifying of all that potential. And each of those moments is a universe because it's a perceptive, collapsed entity, identified. This is where the marriage of the two terms comes from. The collapsing of the wave function, the multiverse, all of that language isn't identifying a thing so much as it's describing this action, this process of taking from potential, the tendencies and conditions of fields of energy, and limiting our experience, our instantiation, our manifestation of that grandeur into just this little me. Great. You figured that out. What are you going to do with it? Wait to die? Or do you want to make that me become less loud and the universe, life, the potential, the amazing, what would we call it in quantum physics? Probabilities. If it's a probability before it's made a decision on, then that probability, it can be moved around. It doesn't have to be attached to that me. It could be attached to me-ness, un-me. Experience life in its entirety, the full potential of your being. I hope that little mental experiment helps you think differently about how you make decisions, how you conduct your life, when you see habit energy, and I know you do, I know something, gosh, why do I keep doing this? Bingo. Because the decision's been made and the pattern's been stamped into your very nature, and you just keep repeating it because it's convenient. It's there. Not too much decision-making happening there. But that's also identifying your ego, your me-ness, your I, mine, possession. If you ever notice a habit, then understand that that habit is a huge matrix of decisions that you're just lazily going through because it's easier. It doesn't have to be that way. It does not have to be that. In fact, it isn't that way. That's a decision to stay that way. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Whoa, what just happened? I just opened my mind, Gohanzan, to the potential rather than the collapse. See, I'm using these terms of quantum because the quantum thinking resonates, pardon the pun, so clearly with Shakyamuni's thinking about how we experience life. That blows my mind. When I first noticed that relationship between the way science is dissecting our experience of physicalness, physics, what they were coming to, what they're still wrestling with, is something Shakyamuni experienced in his mind 3,000 years ago. And we're still trying to figure it out. But you and I, we have a special tool. We have a tool that allows us to penetrate that thinking instantly. But then that just becomes another habit, and that's not good enough. We have to peer into that habit and understand, why are we doing this? How are we doing this? What does it mean to do this? So that's why we study. We help gain little footholds on understanding that matrix of potential, the fields of energy, and how we actually can interact with it in its formations, Buddhist language here, but also physics. We can interact at the level of formation instead of just waiting to see what falls to the ground. It's kind of a pathetic way to live. It's just responding to stimuli. Don't be that person. Be the person who can affect the stimuli, who can redirect all that potential so that we can live life to the full. Yes? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. That was my 20 minutes. Let's start this new chapter. Regarding living beings. That has nothing to do with what I was saying. At that time, Manjushri asked Vimalakirti, how does the Bodhisattva regard living beings? How do you regard others? Which to me is kind of a self-reflexive question, but how do you regard living beings? Vimalakirti replied, as a conjurer looks on the beings he conjures up, interesting language, thus does the Bodhisattva regard living beings. Well, we're going to read a lot more about this, I'm sure, but that sentence on its own is a little bit destabilizing. What it suggests, just that sentence, is that we should see other living beings as constructs of our own minds, not real, but temporarily real. Well, keep quantum in mind here, because what we're talking about, again, is the way we decide, the way we collapse the wave function, the way we analyze probabilities, and we solidify them into isms. Yeah? And so if you think about how the people that you know, siblings, friends, workmates, whatever their positions, our experience of other is really an experience of our own decision-making collapse of the wave function. Because our potential for understanding, identifying, right, other is of our making. That's important to understand that process. We tend to look at other and say, other is independent of us. And whatever they do is more indication of what that is, they are, But we have to understand as Buddhists, that's our mind at work, imposing its collapses of probability on other. And the very labeling of other is that process. So this is deep thinking, and in that sentence, you don't really get that sense of intimacy of our own creation. But conjurer, interesting English word to use, because when you conjure something, what you're identifying as Peter or Janet or Mustafa, it's a product of your thought processes, not something, no matter how loud or habit energies they are, they're still your construction. So let's go on. As the wise view the moon in the water, or a face of form seen in a mirror, as shimmers of heat in torrid season, as the echo that follows a cry, as clouds in the sky, as foam on the water, bubbles on the water, as a thing no firmer than the trunk of a plantain, no longer lasting than a flash of lightning, as a fifth great element, a sixth component, a seventh sense media, a 13th sense media, a 19th sense realm. Thus does the Bodhisattva regard living beings. So what that list of realms and senses and so forth, those are nonsense statements saying like, we know we have 6 senses, but we should view otherness as like a 7th sense, something that is undefined, that we don't know, right? Again, the conjurer conjuring. What is conjured isn't a thing. It is a conjured thought, experience. As forms in the world of formlessness, as sprouts from charred grain, as mistaken views of the body in one who has entered the stream that leads to the state of Arhat, as a re-entering of the womb by one no longer subject to rebirth, as the 3 poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance in an Arhat, as greed, anger, or violation of the precepts on the part of a bodhisattva who has accepted the birthless nature of all existence, as vestiges of earthly desire in a Buddha, as forms seen in a blind person, by a blind person, as the breathing in and out of one immersed in the samadhi of utter tranquility, as the tracks of a bird in the sky, as a child born to barren women, as earthly desires in a phantom being, as sights in a dream after one has awakened, as the taking of a bodily form by one who has entered extinction, as fire that has no smoke, thus does the bodhisattva regard living beings. So, he's trying very difficult thing here with words to define this conjuring, this operation of the mind that ordinarily, without paying attention, would just say, that's a that, that's a that. You're Paul, you're Saskatchewan, you're the United States, you're the world, you're the universe. All decisions being made, collapsing potential into knowns? What are knowns? But our particular habit, energy, identification of thingness, so we can hang on to them. So you're that, and you'll always be that, and that's what you are. No, that's what you're making it with your mind. It's important to understand the process here, because that is what Buddhism is about. That process of identifying everything into a permanent thing, Oh, I don't mean it's permanent, Sifu. I just know that, it's there and it'll be there tomorrow. Well, that's permanence. You do not know that. That is a decision you're making. Because that decision supports your idea, yourself, your I, of what you are, because you are what you possess. And that's where all your misery comes from. Because that's not right. That's the delusion. You need to shift your mind to understand that everything is in this moment and may or may not be in the next. Because that's not what's important. What's important is how this is all happening. That's amazing. And it can't be possessed. It can't be lost. It can only be experienced. What a liberation. What a release. I don't have to carry all this around, these decisions in my big old trash bag of decisions. That's not me. Manjushri said, if the Bodhisattva looks on beings in this way, how can he treat them with compassion? Oh, interesting question. His question is confused, right? Because he's still anchored. If the Bodhisattva looks on beings in this way, how can he treat them with compassion? He's still identifying. He's using the word beings, but he's not understanding beings. He's understanding living beings as things. He's still doing that. So how do I treat that thing well, with compassion, if that thing is something I'm making up? And what Manjushri is missing is that they're doing the same thing, making everything up. Multiverse. I'm just throwing that in. It's no accident that I call our school the Quantum Life Buddhist School. I'm totally within the scholarship of Nichiren and Shakyamuni's teaching of the Lotus Sutra, but also Tendai and all of the great scholars, because they're all pointing to the same thing, that we now in this world, in this time, are defining with supreme precision, even though that is contrary to the thinking, but precisely defining this very process. Quantum is doing that job. It's giving us language to discuss this experience, this life experience, yeah? Personally, locally, I might say, and extrapolate it to the entirety of the universe. Vimalakirti replies, when the Bodhisattva has finished regarding them in this way, interesting language here, he thinks to himself, for the sake of living beings, I must preach this law to them. This is true compassion. There it is. In other words, and I think we need other words because that's a very unsatisfactory, it's accurate, but if we're to understand, you and I, what this means, is Vimalakirti is trying to explain to Manjushri, okay, look on others as your process of identification. Understand that they are all doing that same thing. And what we're doing as Buddhists is trying to transcend that process of identification, right? And by transcending that process of identification, what we come to realize is that all forms of sentient beings, all these minds, can release themselves from this sickness of identification and experience life in its entirety. which breaks down those conjured identifying parameters. You see where we're going here? Because then you are not other to me. When I transcend that identifying of you and me, and I see that you and me are doing exactly the same thing, albeit with, different sets of freight trains of karma, but we're all engaged in the process of living that is the same for you, me, planets, stars, the universe, then there's no separation anymore. There's no identification. There's only, let's do this as one. There's the oneness in Buddhism. The mind, itaidoshin, many in bodies, but one in mind. And what is that mind? Buddha-ness. Myoho Renge Kyo-ness. Do this with me, not because I am helping you. Do this with me so that we can be one. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Don't join me. Let us be together as one. No separation. Let us experience life to the full. This is the Bodhisattva work. Precisely. And this is what Vimalakirti is saying to Manjushri. For the sake of living beings, all the minds, I must preach, lead them, instruct them, assist them, this law of life, the process. Understand what's happening here, and now. The unity of that, the equanimity of that. You see where this word now comes in. This is the critical thought of Buddhism. He treats them with a compassion of tranquil extinction. Extinction of what? Identification. Me. Oh, the process. Not even an us, because that's identification. A knowing and a complete experience of life. How many words do you need to circle around that to get it? Even all my efforts in this video, you have to have that aha moment. I get it. I'm sorry, you have to figure it out. Only you can do that. I'm trying my best to point you to it. He treats them with compassion of tranquil extinction, for it results in no birth. Treats them with a compassion unburning, for it is void of earthly desires. Treats them with a compassion that is impartial. How many ways can we say it? As the three existences of past, present, and future are impartial. Stop trying to identify. Stop trying to predict. Treats them with a compassion free of contention. For nothing arises to oppose it. Treats them with a compassion undualistic. You're not other. You're not a creation of my mind. You are creating yourself. Stop doing that along with me so we can be. For internal and external have no place in it. Treats them with a compassion unfaltering, for it carries through to the end. Treats them with a compassion firm and durable, for the mind of the Bodhisattva never flags. Treats them with a compassion clear, clean, and pure, as the nature of all phenomena is pure, because it's all potential. How can that be sullied? Treats them with a compassion boundless, boundless as the empty sky. This is quite poetic, isn't it? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. He treats them with the compassion of an arhat who has conquered the thieves of desire, treats them with the compassion of a bodhisattva who brings contentment to all beings, treats them with the compassion of a thus come one, Buddha, who has grasped the marks of suchness, treats them with the compassion of the Buddha, who awakens living beings, treats them with the compassion wholly natural, understanding that it is causeless, right? This does not beget that. This begetting that is identification of the process of potential manifesting, collapsing of the waveform. You are not the collapse. You are an observer of the collapse. Become removed from that decision. Be the wave. Treats them with the compassion of Bodhi, which is of only one flavor. Treats them with the compassion that has no gradation, for it cuts off all favoritism. It's all different ways of saying identification. Treats them with the great pity and compassion, guiding them with the great vehicle, Myoho Renge Kyo. He treats them with a compassion that never despairs, seeing that all is empty and without ego. Treats them with the compassion of bestowal of the law, never stinting in its gifts, treats them with the compassion of observance of the precepts, another way of saying observing the process, not making it, not contorting it, witnessing it, training those who break them to do better. We get stuck in identification. We get stuck in emotions. We get stuck in thingness. That's our natural state. Treats them with the compassion of forbearance, guarding both others and self. Provisional language there. Treats them with the compassion of assiduousness, shouldering all beings as its burden. Treats them with the compassion of meditation, unaffected by taste, predilections. Treats them with the compassion of wisdom, which always knows the right time, because it's always the right time. Treats them with the compassion of expedient means, which I'm desperately trying to do with words, yeah? Hopefully I'm succeeding a little bit. With manifestations suited to every occasion. How could it not be? He treats them with a compassion that hides nothing, proceeds with the purity of an upright mind, treats them with the compassion of deeply searching mind, one free of irrelevant motion, treats them with a compassion that is unerring, innocent of falsity and sham, treats them with the compassion full of peace and delight, for through it they gain the delight of the Buddha. Such is the compassion of the Bodhisattva. So there is a little caution there in that last paragraph. Don't delude yourself in that process. If I could just convert a bunch of them, then how important would I be? That's not right. That's not Buddhism. That's religion. That's anger. That's avarice, greed, possession. You can't possess other people's minds. You can try, and they'll let you, because it's easy. But that's not Buddhism. So a little caution there. Continuing his questioning, Manjushri then pops up and says, "What do you mean when you speak of pity?" Yeah, that's a weird word, isn't it? "I mean that whatever benefits the Bodhisattva gains, he shares them all with all other living beings," replied Vimalakirti. "What do you mean by joy?" Manjushri says. "Any way the Bodhisattva can aid or enrich others, he views as an occasion for joy and never for regret. So in our compassion to assist others to gain this insight, how could that not be joyful? We should never walk away from that encounter, mind to mind, with regret, because the aim is Buddha-ness. If that aim falters, then you must correct it, right?" Manjushri, "What do you mean by indifference?" I don't remember him saying that, but indifference. What's indifference? What's difference? Then you know what indifference is. Differences are constructs, conjuring of the mind. Indifference means don't do that. Manjushri, see what Vimalakirti says. "Whatever rewards or good fortune the Bodhisattva bestows, he expects nothing in return." Right. If I help Betty over here achieve an aha moment, that's not my aha moment. That's not my insight. That's hers. She achieves it. This is how I experience joy at her Buddha wisdom. She's forming her own path. I haven't given her anything. So why should I expect anything in return? Adoration? You see how all of that plummets directly into collapsing that potential wave function, because it becomes about me or the ego. So obviously, whatever rewards or good fortune I gain comes from my work, not her achievement of some enlightenment. That's her work, and she will gain from that. See, Buddhism is a very strict way of thinking. It doesn't allow for this wishy-washy world, because it isn't. That's the whole point of Buddhism, is to get rid of the wishy-washy. Manjushri then asks, if the Bodhisattva fears the cycle of birth and death, what should he rely on? What a silly question. Okay, so we're Bodhisattvas. Let's try to interpret fears the cycle of birth and death. It's not about fearing it. It's about recognizing that this is our trap. Our tendencies and conditions want us to adhere to identification, thingness, yeah? So we're trying to transcend that, not eliminate things, transcends our attachment to it. So Manjushri somehow feels like that's a dependency. If we don't have that thingness, then what do we rely on? Well, come on, you know the answer to this. This is a stupid question. We rely on Buddha. We rely on our enlightenment. We rely on the magnificence of the process of life. Being in the potential is aggrandizing. It's amazing. How there is no more. So what should he rely on? The practice. Yeah? Vimalakirti replied, the Bodhisattva, fearing the cycle of birth and death, should rely on the power of the Tathagata's rewards. Enlightenment. Manjushri, if he hopes to rely on the power of the Tathagata's rewards, what course should he pursue? Are you deaf? Okay, let's answer that one. Vimalakirti, if he hopes to rely on the power of the Tathagata's rewards, he should devote himself to saving and liberating all beings. This is getting circular now. Where are you missing the practice, Manjushri? Where are you not understanding that this is a constant effort in your mind, your perspective, your perception, your experience of potential, of life, the process itself? How many ways can we say it, Manjushri? If he hopes to save all living beings, what must he free them from? Oh my God. Did this guy go have lunch and lose his mind? That process of attachment. How many times will we repeat this? Vimalakirti. If he hopes to save all living beings, he must free them from earthly desires. This is what we've been talking about. Manjushri, if he hopes to free them from earthly desires, how should he proceed? Okay, Vimalakirti. He should proceed by the method of correct mindfulness. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Teach them how to chant. Teach them how to enact their own insight machine to distance themselves from everything they identify with. Teach them how to invoke Buddha-ness. Of course, this is long before the Lotus Sutra, so we're not using that language in this sutra, but you and I know what he means. How does one proceed by the method of correct mindfulness? All right. One proceeds on the premise of no birth and no extinction. Start there. Start with the idea that everything that we label is a conjured thing, a constructed thing. The label is a constructed thing for the thing that we hang on to, possess, our fear of losing it. That thinking that we're a great collector of stuff that is not life. That is the illusion we live in samsara. We need to start pushing that down. Let's go shopping. No. Right? It's the leitmotif of our time. This is why it's the age of degeneration. We automatically think in terms of possessing. That mechanism has us drugged. It's like a drug. We can't see the wonder of the experience of life. We're so completely immersed in having that we never have. We're always getting and losing, getting and losing, getting and losing. What are you doing? Live. All of it. You don't need any little baubles to prove that it exists, that the potential is there. Be in the potential. Be in the formation. See it. Be it. Everything after that, it's already over. Why be attached to something that's unbirthed, never really there? It's the experience of getting that you're drugged with. The world of hunger. Insatiable. Manjushri, what has no birth and what has no extinction? Oh man, did you just walk in here from a McDonald's? Have you not been paying attention at all? Vimalakirti, the not good has no birth. The good has no extinction. That's a weird response. So the thingification that you don't need really was never born. In other words, it only came into existence in your mind of acquiring. Left on its own, if you don't know about the latest iPhone, then you don't know to want it, basically. So to you, the new iPhone doesn't exist. Yay. And the stuff that is nurturing to you is your mind's perception, and that never leaves you. It's not about the thing, it's about the mind. Attitude, intent. Keep coming back to that, yeah? Manjushri, what is the root of good and not good? The body is the root, right? Because the body is the place we all begin, from the little kid sticking everything in his mouth or her mouth. She begins her identification career from perception of the body, what it is not, what it is not. It takes a lot of sophistication to finally realize that this body is just an apparatus. It's a tool. It's not the thing itself that life is about. It's about the process that leads to thingification. But if you're stuck on thingification, then you've slipped out of the process. You've slipped out of the formation. That's where life is. The experience of these formation turning to form is amazing, as long as you don't obsess about the form. Now you're a form yourself. Misery. You see? It's an unchanging equation. What is the root of the body? Desire and greed are the root. We know this from the Nidana. The way energy forms, the moment forming becomes known or experienced, desire is intimate with the formation of everything from a photon, an electron, and you and me is all formed of an energy of agglomeration, right? A collector. Greed, desire, they're all intimately entwined in the very formation of form. As soon as any form starts to appear, it is a result of a very primal, pre-primal desire to be. But along with that is the probability. What will I? What will it be? Oh, the curiosity. The formation itself can't form anything until the formation has some tendencies and conditions. That itself is desire, earthly desire, formation desire. See, it doesn't take a consciousness to have desire, but consciousness help and evolve our complexity of desire. Because who can have eyesight if there's nothing to see? That's the object of desire, yeah? The duality starts right in the formations. Before the form happens, those ideas, energies are being collected. It's the very nature of the process of life. This is why we're so attached, right? To things, to accruing, to not losing. but that makes us an emotional wreck. So don't get rid of it, because it's part of the process of being, of life. We're not trying to annihilate all of that. We're just trying to shift our understanding that these are all just results of the process, just like you, just like me. But with our minds, we can transcend all of that. With our minds, we can see with amazement, this process is amazing. That we can see it this way, share it this way, know it this way, means that we can all relax and watch the wonderful play of life in this moment, in this moment, in this moment. Wow, isn't this amazing? Without stress and anxiety, because life is just doing its thing. What is the root of desire and greed? Vimalakirti, false and empty distinctions are the root. He's identifying that illusion, that our habit energy of identification, that's the root. What is the root of false and empty distinctions? Vimalakirti, topsy-turvy thinking is the root. In other words, seeing the world from the opposite perspective. Seeing the world, the universe, your universe, as the foundation of life, rather than seeing the formation of all those things as life. It's topsy-turvy. What is the root of topsy-turvy thinking? Groundless assumptions are the root of topsy-turvy thinking. Identification. For me to see you, something I've created, because the you that I know isn't you. You're busy being you. Your ego is your formation. But I think that I know you because I've imposed all my judgments on you-ness. Has nothing to do with you, really. You are your own engine of being, yeah? So it's groundless for me to make that assumption that you are you, because you, to me, are my collection of interpretations of you. Makes sense, right? What is the root of groundless assumptions? All right, this is getting really ridiculous now, but I guess this is the form of Buddhist teaching, yes? Vimalakirti, what is groundless can have no root. Manjushri, it is on the root of this groundlessness that all the other concepts are built. Do you see how he's approaching the same thing over and over again from all these different angles? I hope you see that. What is he saying? What is groundless can have no root. In other words, these are all assumptions you're making in your mind. They're not based on actual fact, because actual fact is everything's going through formation. So the assumptions you're making, identifying things as they are, is your grand illusion. It is the very ground of suffering. At that time, there was a heavenly being, a goddess, in Vimalakirti's room, who, seeing these great men and hearing them expound the law, proceeded to make herself visible, and taking heavenly flowers, scattered them over the bodhisattvas and major disciples. When the flowers touched the bodhisattvas, they all fell to the floor at once, but when they touched the major disciples, they stuck on them and did not fall off. The disciples all tried to shake off the flowers through their supernatural powers, but they could not do so. At that time, the goddess said to Shariputra, "Why try to brush off the flowers?" "Such flowers are not in accordance with the law," he replied. That's why I try to brush off the flowers. And the goddess said, don't say these flowers are not in accordance with the law. Why? Because the flowers make no such distinctions. You in your thinking have made up these distinctions. That's all. Oh, man, yes. You in your thinking have made up these distinctions. If one who has left the household life to follow the Buddha's law makes such distinctions, that is not in accordance with the law. One must be without distinctions to be in accordance with the law. Look at the bodhisattvas. The flowers did not stick to them because they have already cut off all thought of distinctions, just as evil spirits are able to take advantage of a person who is beset by fear. So because you disciples are fearful of the cycle of birth and death, the senses of form, sound, smell, taste, and touch are all able to take advantage of you. But once a person has done away with fear, then the 5 desires that arise from these senses will not be able to get at him. They'll be converted into appreciative perception. So long as one has not done away with all such entanglements, there's that word again, the flowers will stick to him, but they will not stick to someone who has eliminated them all. And I'm going to stop there because this is getting kind of long, but believe me, I could just keep going. I'm really loving this chapter. Look, we covered a lot of ground today. I hope this is making some sense. If there's something I glossed over, please say so in the comments. Email me, let me know. But I love this sutra. It's not the ultimate teaching, but it sure helps clarify the ultimate teaching, doesn't it? It really drills down, and I appreciate that. Maybe that's just my nature. I hope you do too. Thank you again. I can't thank you enough for participating, downloading the audio podcasts if they help you. If there's some books, I don't know, it's probably time I wrote another one, but I'm not sure what I would say that I haven't said in these videos. I don't think we read as much anymore, so I don't know. I don't know what... I will just keep reading sutras and Buddhist knowledge and sharing my experience of them with you. And I hope that you've got to know my effort is genuine, and I hope that comes through. I rely on that coming through, and that something in it will be the source of your insights, aha moments, right? Keep your practice strong, stay healthy, be kind to yourself. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.